I was in Charlotte, North Carolina last night on the field for this one. Georgia 10, Clemson 3. I wish you guys could have been there. A lot of you were, obvious from watching on TV or being there in person. Packed house, sold out, over 74,000 there, and it was the first college football atmosphere and whole that a lot of us have experienced in well over 2 years. Defense was back and crowds were back. We talked about this all summer, not to be confused with offseason. All summer long, we talked about it, and both the factors that we thought would go into making a renaissance season for college football were present last night. Deafening on the field and insane levels of defense being played on the field. I tweeted this last night during the game, and it didn't change after I tweeted it. This was one of the most glaring physical mismatches on the line of scrimmage I've ever watched from field level. And I've seen a lot of games down there, and I've seen a lot of blowout games. This wasn't a blowout game because neither offense could pull away. The level of domination Georgia had on the line of scrimmage was something we expected. It's the reason I picked Georgia to win the game, not to this level. I don't think Kirby expected it to that level. I certainly don't think Clemson staff expected it to that degree. Now, I can tell you, if you heard me throughout the week last week, even after picking Clemson to win it all, I ended up, as the week progressed, feeling more and more like Georgia was going to take that game, because I can tell you that they were very confident. Georgia was extremely confident they were just going to dominate the line of scrimmage. Now, what they were worried about was, well, will you have some pop plays? Will you have some receivers get over the top? Will you have DJ Uiagalelei bail them out? Will it look like a stat line where he puts up 380 or 400 yards passing and they run it for 90 yards? Well, no, it wasn't that at all. Georgia was supremely confident, and they had a reason to be. 23 carries for 2 yards. That was the Clemson rushing total. If you want to run the numbers, go for it. If you don't, I had Stats and Info do it in-house here. That is 0.1 yards per carry. That's worse than Bama treated Leonard Fournette. That's worse than some of the most dominant run defense performances you will ever see. Oh, and by the way, they did the Georgia Bulldog defense, 7 sacks by 8 different guys. Again, standing on the field, I know what it looked like at home. I've watched the replay. Standing on the field, you can't imagine. You go to the end zone. I went to the end zone in the latter portion of the third quarter to watch some of Georgia's interior guys working to have that different vantage point as opposed to just standing on the sideline. There were times, I'm not talking about stunts or twists or some exotic zone blitzes. There were straight up one-on-one situations that became so dominant on the side of Georgia that there were Clemson offensive linemen not going to say not touching anyone, barely getting a hand on a defender. And so I don't know what you expected from DJ Uiagalelei. I mean, the guy did not play well last night. I don't know how he could have played well, is my point. So that's what we all watched. Now, how did you interpret it? Because a lot of people have interpreted this game a lot of different ways. I'll give you my take here. I really think Georgia fans need to be happy with the win. This is a huge win. It's a statement win. You can be happy and still have some concern, but I've looked across the landscape, whether it be my own personal phone, interacting with some of you guys. Jake Rowe pulls right up to me on the street in downtown Charlotte last night, says, "Hey, man," and we sat there in traffic, me on the sidewalk like a hobo and Jake in a vehicle like a normal human being, and I said, "How does the board over there at Dogs 24/7 feel?" And he said, "Well, they like the defense, but offense, big concern." Yeah, I get that. Okay, I understand. If you're listening on the podcast, you don't even know what those sounds were. I get all that. What I really wish more fans knew how to do is they knew how to set their own context and not allow what I call college football tourists, whether they be outside fans or media, to define your expectation and to define how your mood should be. You got some folks that will drive by right now and they'll look over there at Georgia football and they'll say, "Oh, y'all ain't going to be able to score enough to beat Bama," and then they'll just drive away. Those aren't Georgia. Those aren't Georgia people. They're not one of you. How about this? How about you stop letting outsiders set the narrative for you? Ooh, dirty word. We don't like narrative. Just stop letting other people tell you how you should feel. You can be very happy because college football is about moments. Georgia fans should be extremely happy. Not satisfied, but happy. College football, more so than any other American sport, it's about the big moments. A lot of those, a vast majority of those, happen in the regular season. No one talks about the Saints-Dolphins game from 1997 in Week 9. They just don't matter. But in college football, regular season games matter. Georgia hasn't won enough of these. They won one last night. and you want some perspective, imagine how you would have felt on Friday if I told you, hey, good morning. I shook the magic 8 ball. I have seen into the future. You guys are going to score 3 offensive points Saturday night, 10 points total. You're going to put up 256 yards total offense. You are going to lose the turnover battle. How do you feel? Well, you wouldn't have even bothered to turn on the game. That's how sure you would have been that 10 total points, 256 total offense, and losing the turnover battle was going to not only lead to you losing to Clemson, it was probably going to lead to a humiliating loss again on the national stage. And instead, you know what you did? You won. You beat Clemson. One of the most dominating defensive performances in several years, really, when you think about it. And so that's something to be celebrated. Here's how you should look at it if you're a Georgia fan. Remember how the 2019 season ended? Where the 2019 season ended is where the 2021 season is beginning. You remember the realization, hard one, that you came to against LSU. You said, man, we played pretty well defensively here, but eventually the dam broke because we could not trade points. When we go up against an elite offense, we can't trade points. Well, right here in this very moment, maybe that is Georgia football. But it's not over in 2021. It's just beginning. And you got better weapons probably on this roster than you did in 2019. You probably got a better quarterback at his top end than you did in 2019. So what are you going to do? That's the question. You still got a long way to go. But it's not the end. It's only the beginning. That's how you should look at it. Clemson, however, may have some permanent flaws on this team. And it doesn't really thrill me to say that because I'm the one that picked them to win the national championship. I don't have fingernails. I got a really bad habit. I don't do many things, but one of the things I do that's a terrible habit is I bite my fingernails, have for a long time. And there are some struggles that those of us who bite our nails go through in life that a lot of you could never imagine. And one of them is opening the top on canned Coke products. Or Pepsi, if you want to sponsor the show, that's fine. It's hard. A lot of times we have to either ask someone to do it for us or we got to go find a credit card or something to slide in under the tab to pop it because we cannot get a grip on it. And if you've ever, with no fingernails, tried to open a pop top, you know exactly how it felt to be a Clemson fan watching their offense last night. What do you do? What do you call? If you don't have the speed at receiver, and they don't, to get over the top of a defense, and if you don't have an offensive line that can give your quarterback time even if you do have those elements, what do you call? You can't call anything. So it was just basically let's wait for the clock to run out last night or hope that Georgia's stupid enough to put the ball in the air where we can force a turnover and get back into it. Well, that wasn't happening. And because of that, they lost the game last night. Now, I heard on a lot of the post-game coverage the automatic assumption that Clemson will win the rest of their games, of course, like it's their birthright, and then they'll go on to the ACC title game. They'll be back in the playoff. Then what are they going to do? It's not assumed, in my mind, that Clemson just wins the rest of their games. There are elements that these teams normally possess, the great teams, that give them pull-away capability in any week, that give them bailout capability, even if they're playing subpar in any week. It's just that electric, explosive, normally several versions of it at wide receiver, quarterback, offensive line. There are enough of those elements to where they'll just outrun you. I mean, they'll run past you. They're racehorses. That's not Clemson right now. I stood right there about 10 feet from their wide receiver core and watched them warm up last night. They're all the same. They're all the same person. Now, that's good if you're looking for big, physical receivers. There's not a single Arian Smith on their roster. There's not a single Jalen Waddle on their roster. They don't have the speed element out there that those other elite programs do. The LSU 2019 team had that. They still got it now with Keyshawn Boutte. I have a bunch of other pieces that they can depend on there right now, but they got that. Clemson doesn't have that. So if you don't have an offensive line that's consistent enough, and you don't have the elements out wide that can break games open, you're going to probably run up on a couple of more teams this year that you're favored by over 3 touchdowns against that on a random Saturday are going to give you fits. I mean, that random game, back-to-back road games, October 23rd at Pitt. You have no idea how that could turn out because you don't have enough elements on this team right now that you're confident enough in to where you can sleepwalk your way to a win. You can't do that. And so I know there are a lot of assumptions out there about Clemson. I'm not making that assumption. This is certainly not any foregone conclusion in my mind. Another interesting observation I made last night, this may mean something to you, it may mean nothing to you. I, before the game, was standing right outside the locker rooms. And I say it plural because it was a really weird setup last night. I don't think they showed you this on TV. This was not a normal stadium setup. In these NFL stadiums, a lot of times you're not using the NFL team's locker room. You're using kind of a satellite locker room. And I'm not totally sure what the setup was last night. All I'm telling you is both teams' locker rooms were next to each other. They shared the same tunnel, they walked down the same corridor, and they walked right next to each other. I watched it happen. Georgia comes out of their locker room sounding exactly how you would think a major college football program is going to sound when they're about to play a major game. I filmed it. I can't show it to you for obvious reasons because we would have to edit a lot of it out. Clemson walks out of their locker room like they've just been to a funeral visitation. Now, I've been around Clemson before. It's a lot more methodical type of program. When they played LSU a couple of years ago, it was like this. Well, the result was kind of the same. Higher scoring, but kind of the same. What I'm saying is people hollering and yelling, that's not the end-all be-all. That doesn't win you a football game. But the collective mentality of a team very much does matter. And there wasn't a lot of juice with Clemson last night. I'm not talking about after the game, guys. I'm talking about before the game. I stood out there again at the half. Clemson's coaches were more fired up than those players were coming out of the locker room. Georgia, you didn't have to worry about that. If anything, you had to worry about pulling the reins back on some of those guys a little bit. Just an interesting observation. I'm not telling you it was quantifiable at all. I'm not telling you it made a dime's worth of difference in the game. Just something interesting I saw. But I'll tell you, it's going to be fun now to watch Georgia Saturday. They got UAB coming into town. No one's going to pay attention to it. It's going to be one of the most well-coached teams they play all year. Bill Clark's got a good team at UAB. Georgia is favored by 27.5, or at least that's where it opened. So I'll be interested because you look at the schedule now, and there's going to be the same assumption for Georgia. They're not going to lose another game. Maybe Florida could push them. But look, just because you won a game last night doesn't mean you may not have some of the same problems Clemson has, to be honest with you. The difference is I think Georgia, there's a lot of confidence that they're going to get some pieces back. Kyrus Jackson's not nearly 100%. Jermaine Burton was barely involved last night. Darnell Washington not playing. Eric Gilbert, who knows what happens to him down the road. So there are reasons for confidence that Georgia was a shell now of what they eventually will be. But let's just see, because week over week incremental improvement, that's what you're looking for. That's development. That's coaching. When you get the talent on campus, that's what you're supposed to do with it. But Georgia wins 10-3. Phenomenal atmosphere. Loved Charlotte. They gave away for the media gift, I kid you not, complimentary jars of mayonnaise.